G'day guys and girls, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and we have another great episode coming in today for you guys. We had a really good, we received it really well, or the audience did, I should say, in regards to the investor story, the first investor story of the year that we did around about a month ago that came out. I've got some very interesting stuff here because I have got the brother of that man himself, Mr. Liam Montgomery, mate. It's great to have you here. Brother of Luke. Mate, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
No worries, mate. No worries at all. Mate, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the relationship with your brother as well, because he's a good fella too, mate.
Yeah, Luke's, he's good. He's good. Pretty similar to him in the sense of wanting to invest in property and everything. So, and he kind of looked up to him and then learnt a lot from him, as people would have probably heard from the podcast with him about how his journey started.
100%, man.
Yeah.
100%. Mate, tell us a bit about yourself as well. What do you do, man? And even like a bit of an overview, sort of snapshot of the portfolio as well. You know, what are you up to in terms of properties, man? And yeah, just a bit of a background.
So I guess from a bit of a personal perspective, my background's in markets. I'm like a equity dealer, which is basically kind of like a stockbroker, but without all the fun of the commission and side of things. So I'm very involved in watching markets, macroeconomic stuff, all that kind of stuff. And then property wise, I've got now 3 properties that have gone all through you, and it's been quite the journey so far, and I can't wait to see what happens going forward. Mate,
it has been a good journey. It's been very interesting to watch you. Man, you were kind of got on the bandwagon very early, and got in when the market was very quiet and quite dead. Kind of starting back a little over 3 years ago, in late 2019. So, mate, it was a good time to kind of get started and get everything moving from that end as well, man.
Yep.
So that's awesome, man. And tell us, I guess, a little bit about like what you do, I guess, career-wise, man. Break that down a little bit for us as well, because it's an interesting one because of who you are and obviously market trends and watching it all and everything like that. Give us a bit of a, I guess, background in that, man.
Yeah, so pretty much because I'm like buying and selling stuff for clients all the time on like the share front, I'm constantly reading about pretty much anything that you can read of. We obviously talk a bit whenever there's like massive news that comes out, and over the past year there's been a bit of a every time.
It's kind of like you and I once a week, we're like texting each other this or that. I'm like, what are you saying? What am I saying? A couple of F-bombs getting dropped every second text. It's been a crazy year.
Yeah, but so for me that obviously like helps quite a lot. It gives me that bit more of that analytical edge in some things which a lot of people aren't, I guess, fortunate enough to see as live as I kind of get to do, and I can kind of filter out a lot of the media's doom and gloom, or like hysterics that come with all the ups and the downs. Yeah, exactly. So that helps me stay quite a lot more informed in making decisions whenever you bring something to me, those kind of things. Yeah,
100%. So in terms of that as well, like I've always been curious, man, and I think it's an interesting one because I know you dabble in both, shares and property and whatnot as well. Yep. Obviously, because you're very, I guess, vested and educated in that space as well. Why did you go so heavily into property over shares? Why aren't you all in shares?
I think it's got to be to do with the leverage, really, and also then looking back from when I was much younger, like looking at our family friends that they bought property and in like what are now blue chip locations, so it's a completely different strategy to what we're operating with now. But I could still see that was what I kind of wanted to do, and I could see that if I really wanted, like especially later on in life, to have a good amount of wealth kind of thing, that property was definitely an avenue that's going to significantly help me and I guess fast track it a little bit. Not like there's any sort of cheat code to get rich quick kind of thing, but it was always just I knew that a lot of Aussies make money through property, just as the nature of our market. So that was just always something I wanted to do along with shares. Yeah, but obviously my share portfolio is significantly smaller than my property portfolio.
But man, that's a great point to make though, right? Because it's like, it's significantly smaller, but is it significantly smaller because of what you just said, the ability to be able to leverage so hard in the Australian market?
Yeah, like there's plenty of ways to leverage with shares as well, and I do from time to time. But at the same time, I guess it's maybe my mentality around the property market. I'm far more willing to leverage like you do to buy a house and all those kind of things compared to shares.
And I think that's why the banks take like they call them like loan. What do they call the loans?
Margin loans.
Margin loans. Yeah, you get the margin loans for your shares and stuff. There's a reason why banks hate them, right? It's because it's such a volatile and a liquid asset. But like if the shit falls out of a company or a market, or something, see you later. Like it's gone, right? And that's why they almost maybe not as bad as a $500,000 credit card or get a $500,000 line loan like that, but they're margin loan, sorry, but they're yeah, man, like there's a reason why like leveraging in that space is seen as a lot more volatile, a lot more risky than leveraging in property.
Yeah, and naturally it's also not really income generating like a property.
Yes.
Like when you're getting a rental return on it is. So obviously there's that factor on it as well. Yeah,
100%. Oh, well, there you go, guys. Direct from the share master himself, or the property economic. He's understanding, I guess man, this is a great little first bit of wisdom, from someone that's heavily involved in especially in that side of it, to be going so deep onto the property side and leveraging hard. Man, that's really cool. It's a good lesson. I think a lot of people, they talk about that share versus property battle, and what you should be doing. And you're obviously diversified into both, but what you've been able to build has become significantly bigger because of what you've been able to do there.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, there's always a place for shares in my portfolio, and I'll never get rid of them. I'll always have some nature of what I do. I'm always looking for stuff to buy and whatnot. But yeah, the lion's share of my portfolio will be property over the long run. Yeah, and as it is right now.
That's beautiful, mate. Yeah. That's beautiful. How good, man. All right, buddy. Well, mate, let's jump straight into deal one then. Let's talk into that, man. Timeline. Where are you at? Like, how old are you at the time? Sorry, man. How old are you right now as well?
28.
28 years old. Okay, so going back to 2019.
2019,
okay, beautiful.
Yeah,
all right, man.
When I was a bit younger, still young, but a bit younger, despite what people tell me.
That's it, man. Mate, talk us through it. Talk us through, I guess, like one thing I'd love to know as well is maybe talking a bit about the story about how you I mean, we spoke about this a little bit with Luke, but like how you found us and I guess how that all kind of built and progressed around there and then all the way through to that first deal.
Yeah, so pretty much it kind of started on a different podcast that I started to listen to because my brother Luke mentioned, I know you're interested in property, and I had pretty much been following stuff for as long as he had. He had a bit more money than I did initially, so he did that initial deal that everyone's heard of that went so well.
It's a great tagline, 250K down to over $500,000 in front.
Keep laughing. But yeah, from that, like, I obviously learnt quite a lot, and I always knew that with what I did and just how my life is, I just didn't have the time to actually go out and look for property. I just didn't have the time to do all the research that's required, which obviously Luke probably in hindsight wishes he spent more time doing for the location he bought in at the time and how it went. But for me, that was also just that great learning experience to be like, okay, as much as I'd love to do it by myself, realistically, there's a good chance I'll have a similar result to that, which obviously I don't want to be dusting however much money kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously I was just listening to a bunch of podcasts. He pointed out a couple of your ones early on. And then listening to you and like hearing what you were like when you were younger and whatnot, I just thought it was quite relatable. And then I think I just reached out to you, had a little chat, and then I was like, he's not some BA that's just like, give me money and then get out of here kind of thing.
Deals,
It was like, okay, he genuinely wants to see me succeed and everything. So I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. And then we jumped in.
Mate, talk me through, because one of the parts that I love, I meant to lead in with this as well, was kind of, you started from very humble beginnings, I mean, it's not like you'd come out of uni, you weren't on a huge wage. Tell listeners, like, what were you making at the time and how much of a deposit did you have when you came and started working with us as well?
Yeah, so I was, back then it was on about 65 grand. So, but like, as a starting wage, it was perfectly fine. Like, not gonna like go, I wish I was on whatever kind of thing. But like, it was just a modest kind of income for me back then. I had about 50 grand in savings that I'd earned over for however many years kind of thing. And taking me probably took me like 3 or 4 years to even get like that 50 grand to put into that first deal, which then we ended up all in was like, I think 44 and a half kind of grand to do that first deal, which is, it's like, obviously that was pretty much all in. So there's a bit of risk there. Like, but I was happy to take that risk.
Happy to take the risk, roll the dice.
Yeah.
Send it. There you go. Straight from the man himself. All right, man. We'll talk us through the first deal, because I mean that's a tight budget, right? As well. Yeah. Like you're talking, especially like when we're talking 50 grand, which you also need to hold a bit of a buffer on, which you want to be careful of. So talk us through, I guess the mindset around that. Well, actually, talk us through the first deal, man. Let's talk through the first deal first.
Yep. So we bought that around Brizzy, and so back end of 2019, which is probably when market was near its lows kind of thing, which is
definitely at a very low point.
Quite fortunate, obvioly. But didn't obviously have much money, which obviously hamstrung us quite a bit. But we ended up finding three better. What was it? You said it.
3-bed, 1-bath, weatherboard.
Yeah, that's the one. Weatherboard. I can't remember the word.
Yeah. You're a New South Wales boy, mate. I'll let it go.
Yeah, what's weatherboard? So we found that, and actually found it at first for a bit more. I think it was 203 and a half. And then you went and chewed their heads off a bit in the building and pest and got that down to 190, which is 190s.
Yeah.
Where are those?
Man, I still remember laughing about this deal because at the time, I can't remember if I told you this, man. At the time, it was like listed at like offers over the 249. Like they were kind of chasing like 250, 260.
Yeah, wow.
And they just had done a price drop to, I think it was off over 239 or something like that. So I dropped it like 10, but I knew like when they'd gone through that change, I was like, all right, these guys need to move this thing.
Yeah.
And I remember, man, haggling, going hard and trying to smash this thing down. It took me, it was weeks and weeks of negotiation to get it to 203 and a half. And that was I think the cool thing, man, was when we had it secured at that, but then when we were able to go back for that building and pest, the cool thing on it too was the building and pest. I know you know this story, but obviously letting the listeners in on it as well, was there was an old asbestos shed at the back that was all cracked up and it had a big old asbestos roof and all the rest of it. And we knew we had to get rid of it because of the condition that it was in. The cool thing was I'd really sold the story that this was a young fella. This is all he had to buy this property. So when these issues came up with the shed and with the asbestos and everything, that was obviously the young fella didn't have the money to pay for it, so we needed to get that as a reduction.
Yeah.
We got our quotes, everything in order. I kind of negotiated as hard as we could, and we got the extra 13.5 grand off. The really cool thing was that we were able to strip the whole thing back. Completely strip all the asbestos out. The frame was still good because it was an old hardwood shed, and we just recladded it and re-roofed it. I think it was 4.5 grand full turnaround, right?
Yeah, so already in the green just on that deal. That's part of the deal there. Yeah,
100%, man. And then that was all you did, eh?
Yeah, didn't do anything.
Didn't touch it
until probably about a year ago, where I just did a bit of paint on the interior. So the PM at the time, so it was in between the rental lease agreement actually expired, and they were like, "Oh, if you want to do some painting, these are your quotes." It was a bit too expensive for me to do both at the time, or just didn't see the value in it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
She at the time recommended just do the interior; it'll make it just that bit more livable.
Yeah.
No one really cared about the outside from like how it looks if you're just renting there, kind of thing, for the most part.
And at the price point, it was that. Yeah, it was the bottom end of the market for what it was.
Yeah.
You know, it was. No, that's good, man. That's
Yeah.
good. And so cheap, like man, were you put up? Because a lot of people think as well, we're not talking Brizzy like 50 Ks from Brizzy. No. This was like 18 Ks from the CBD, right? Like right on the fringe of the Brizzy CBD.
Yeah, no more than like a half-hour drive into the CBD.
Yeah.
I thinking back, maybe it did a little bit, like slightly off-putting or something, because I'm like, 190, what's wrong with this
in
thing?
Sydney,
kind of
sub 200. You're like, what's going on?
There's got to be something wrong with this thing. But no, I was happy to just completely trust you and just go all in on it, and it paid massive dividends in the end. So very happy I did.
Well, I mean, we had comps on that thing as well in like the mid 200s. So there was good comps on it, mate. Yeah. So that was good. You kind of, at least at the time, I kind of feel you were probably circa around about 40 grand up on the way in after we negotiated the additional bit off, which was epic, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's nuts.
What about, like, that was your first property, man? How old were you? 24, was 24, 25 when you bought that?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
What'd your family say? Like first property?
So I actually did it, like I reached out to you when both my parents were away. Just
Home alone.
Yeah, it just happened to be the case. It wasn't planned like that or anything.
Fortuitous timing.
And I think that was probably quite a blessing in disguise, because I think if you go back to that whole like circle of influence kind of stuff that you've talked about before on the potty, I honestly think that if my parents were home at the time and I was talking to them about it as I was really thinking about it and ready to pull the trigger, I probably would have been talked out of it a little bit, or certainly would have delayed jumping in, because I remember when my parents got back and I spoke to them about it, they were I was like, oh, I'm going to buy a place, and they're like, what are you talking about? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, it's going to be up here. It's going to be like this price. And she's like, that price? Like, what do you want about like that? That can't be right. Yeah.
What's in the roof?
Are you sure there's walls? Like, or anything wants to catch, kind of thing. So I think and even then I was kind of like, ooh, a little like uneasy, but I was like, no, I'm ready to go. Yeah. Let's just do this. And I'm so glad I have. And even like parents now, like, they're going, geez, well done. Like, they're like so proud of me for like just going and doing it, kind of thing. So stick to your guns, I guess, is the message if you're out there listening, ready to go and unsure.
100%, man, 100%. And look, we'll get, I guess, a little bit further on into potty as to what we did with that property recently as well, right? But in terms of, valuations and going through it and getting actual vals on it and whatnot as well, like, how did that come out in the back end of that after that purchase?
So at first, there was actually probably in between going to a broker at first, there was actually some shares that that came across, like a private equity deal that I thought, that might be interested in going in. Like you're like, private equity, that's going to turn into X amount. Oh, wow. So I was like, okay. I put some money into that, probably about 15 grand. And in the end, that didn't really actually turn out that well. So in hindsight, I probably wish I did actually just go ahead and plow into another property a bit sooner with that cash. But that's how it is sometimes.
There's always lessons, man, along the journey. You always look like, I could have done this, could have done that. Yeah, everyone has their lessons they learn from. Yeah. But
so it's potentially like maybe 3 or 4 months worth of like wages that I kind of put into, maybe a bit more that I'd saved and essentially put into that deal.
Yeah.
And then just like kind of sat on that for a while. And then it's probably about a year later from that initial purchase at the end of 2019 that I reached out to a broker and we were trying to get vals done there. It was kind of getting drawn out a lot. I wasn't quite getting like the vals that we were wanting to see.
It was also a very, very busy time in the market. So I remember this, man. Brokers were super busy at this time. We're talking, so it was, COVID had kicked off in March and it was dead. It was a dead time in the market for 6 months until kind of mid to call it late 2020. Yeah. And then the market just started firing, started to go crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, man, so many people having issues with brokers because, just the time involved, they were all so swamped, especially the good ones. Like there was a lot of them really, really swamped under at the time.
Yeah, well, it was like up to like 3 months. I remember like hearing, whereas if you went direct like to a bank lender, you could potentially get in like within a week kind of thing and sorted, but so be it, that's what happened kind of thing. So that was probably about 3 to 5 months that was kind of spent, or kind of wasted, I guess, trying to get a good val there kind of thing that we could pull out equity to roll into another deal.
Yeah.
So I wasn't using all my savings that I had already.
Yeah.
So then we ended up getting that broker, found another one, which ended up getting it done. But again, because of the timing, it still took about another 3 months. Yeah. So we were already like midway through 2021 almost kind of thing. Yeah. So it's almost 18 months from when I've...
Yeah, because you took your time out a little bit at the start with this equity fund play that you did first, and then you're having issues around brokerage and
also like when I did that first deal, like it was kind of just a dip the toe in the water. I'm in the market. Let's just kind of see. Hey, okay, let's see how this goes. I wasn't like, I'm going to buy one, then I'm going to rip out equity. I was still you talked about level investors. I was like level 0,
0.1,
yeah,
0.1 level investor.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I like to think I'm a little bit above that now, but
just
back
a little
then,
bit. Yeah,
I was like had no real idea. So I was just like, let's just dip the toe in. I completely trust this guy with my money, and it's worked. But then so that rolled forward that 18 months with a new broker looking at doing it now. Ended up getting a great refi val. I think it was just shy of like 300 grand, like around that time. So I'm thinking, how good is this? This is easy. What do I need to work for? I just made however much money.
Over 100 grand out. Yeah.
So then still there was like another couple of months there of waiting for that fully to get processed with the banks and everything, which then led into the second deal where I pulled out 75K of equity on that.
Can I say one thing on this as well? Because this is one thing a lot of people get wrong, and I know there's a podcast a few eps ago, guys, where I talk about kind of sticking with your mainstream lenders when you begin with. And I remember the broker that put you, the lender that they put you with on that initial deal was more of a kind of like a secondary lender, not a second tier lender, but a secondary lender. It's kind of like an affiliate of a mainstream bank. But the issue was, and I know this well from my own experience, and obviously working with a lot of you guys as well, they don't val the same way. They val a lot more conservatively. So they're cheaper rates. And this is where you have to really weigh up, like, what's the most important thing to you? If the most important thing to you is growing the portfolio quickly and effectively and really smashing that out, which obviously at the time for you, it wasn't that. It was the cheapest rate and kind of getting all that sorted. But that's what kind of hamstrung you because at first you're with these guys, you're locked in for a little bit, and it wasn't until you kind of getting to the back end of kind of that fixed period that you were then able to start shopping vals from different lenders, and it started coming back at what it realistically was worth. Yeah. Because it's always been an experience of mine. You go with these kind of secondary or second, third tier lenders, and they're conservative. Their valuers are conservative, whereas the mainstream banks they have a little bit more of that appetite for, I'd say risk, but it's really just like valuing things for what they're realistically worth instead of undershooting them. And so while the market was still flat in that 12 months, even though you'd made the money on the way into it, they weren't showing it as vals. They're just saying, oh no, well this is what it's sold for. We're going to use it this because we're a conservative bank. Yeah. I think it's where a lot of people go wrong. They focus in those early days on the rate, the cheapest rate, but they shoot themselves in the foot in terms of portfolio growth. Yep. This is obviously no, talking down on what you've done, but it's a great lesson in there that can be learned and obviously shared, and passed on to the listeners as well. It's not always about the rate. It's about what this lender and what this situation can do for you as well.
Yep, exactly.
So, man, talk us through your next deal. Sorry, man, I saw you thunder for a sec there.
Well, I am the guest, so.
Sorry, man. I'll go sit down for a bit. You just talk, all right?
Yeah, so deal 2, that was over in Perth. So I've gone from the east coast to the west.
Yep.
And I was, because of the...
When are we? What time of year?
So it would have been just after that. So probably, I think it's settled around September 2021.
Is when the second deal
The
settled.
second deal settled.
Okay,
so
cool,
almost
cool.
2 years on from the first one. Okay. So,
And pretty decent timing of Perth as well. Perth
Yeah.
was still reasonably stagnant in 2021. It didn't really start kicking until 22. So still a good time to be buying in early in the market,
Yeah.
like we'd done in the first.
yeah, I think we got in and it was probably like 30, 40 grand under market value
Yeah.
at the time or something. Yeah, so I was able to use...
On or off market?
I was off market.
I knew that was a plane now. Yeah, go on.
Testing me. How well do I know my deals? Yeah, so I was able to pretty much use all the equity that I'd extracted and still had change. So I was
Really?
able to do BAF, everything,
Yeah.
like stamp duty, the works.
With an equity release.
Was just purely on the equity release.
Love
just
that.
Completely not touching anything
Love
of my own. I couldn't believe it, to be honest.
Yeah, beautiful.
So bought that for $250
On the dot, yeah.
on the dot. And that was a nice big block, about 700 meters squared. So there's the potential to do a granny build there.
Levers, we love levers to be able to pull further
Yep.
down the track. Cash
Yep.
flow plays, beautiful.
Yep, exactly. So had that deal, and then
Talk about the house. What's the house? 250 grand.
yeah,
People are
sorry.
thinking we're in Perth, we're in Metro Perth. Again, probably circa 20 Ks from the CBD. 250 grand. What's this thing? An old fibro shack falling over? What is it?
yes, it's a nice 3x1 brick house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like the surprise there. Yeah, so like great place. Like again, like living in Sydney, like
100%.
you dream of that kind of thing for that price. You bite someone's hand off for that kind of thing. So yeah, so obviously got that, and then we started to go through the process of even looking at building that granny build on that at the time, which obviously takes some time. But in the end, we decided not to pull the trigger on that one, which probably would have been about December or January 21, 22, where we decided to
Keep accumulating.
just keep accumulating.
Sandbag that for now and keep accumulating.
Yep, which I guess we'll probably come to later on. So that was essentially deal 2.
Yeah, beautiful. So we're talking 30 to 40K below market on that thing. Current value now, estimates?
It's about 330 is what I've been told.
Yeah, that's a lot on one. Yeah. 330, 350, somewhere around that mark. What's it renting for as well?
I was renting for 370 a week.
370 a week on a 250K purchase.
Yeah. So that actually started at
Very nice.
I think 260 a week. And we decided to leave the tenant in there. They were, I think, there till Feb.
Yep.
Because we thought we might be doing that granny build. We decided just
Leave
leave
it
him
in
in
there.
there.
Yeah,
And then once that agreement ends, then we'll do the granny build. But then that wasn't the case. So we brought up to market rents, and that's 370 now.
Yeah.
So pretty happy with that.
I love that, man, because I remember I remember these deals very well. I always do. But I remember this one clearly because it was actually 2. I don't know if I ever told you this. There was 2 that was owned by the same owner.
Yep.
And so we were able to get access to both of them off market. They had a quick, easy sale. They had shit rents on these properties, low rents with another, 4 to 6 months kind of left on leases. So it kind of shot themselves in the foot with that of trying to take them to market. So yeah, man, we're able to buy the double, both off market and be able to negotiate very heavily on the price. And one thing to note here, guys, is like a lot of people, and at the time market rent was probably, the rents probably weren't what they are now, 370 to probably 400 a week is market rent on something like that right now. But at the time it was probably, maybe 330, 340 a week, something like that. A lot of people would look at the 260 and not pull the trigger because of that exact reason, right? But you've got to actually look at the opportunity cost of that. Even if you were called it, let's say market rent was 360 a week, right? So it was $100 a week difference from what it was worth, okay? And you're buying it and you settle it and you carry the thing, even say worst case it was 6 months, which it wasn't. You said September, it's not even 6 months, but even if it was 6 months, at $100 a week over the course of a full year, 52 weeks in a year, that's $5,200, right? For 6 months, you're talking $2,600. The amount of people that I know would pass on that deal and not run those numbers and actually realize I'm getting 30 to 40K below market in a pretty, great spot. You know, everything's moving, everything's going on, everything for the exchange of let's say 30 grand below market for the exchange of I'm going to be $2,600 a week, a year down for the 6 month window. You know what I mean? Like it's such a tiny trade off, but people they can't work it in their heads. They don't realize it. But like that was the opportunity and why we're able to negotiate extremely hard on that deal. And it's a story that can obviously be sold quite easily to agents, which then gets passed on to sellers and whatnot as well. And so often you can negotiate extremely good deals in situations like that as well. So. That was an interesting one. It was good. It was good. That was a nice deal, man. Yeah, and
I think like going back to what you said, like so many people would pass on it, but you got to. It's not just about the deal right then and there. You've got to like look at it and like the fact that we could do the granny building as well. I always knew 100%. That there's the potential to increase the cash flow in that deal, whether it was just the rent on the existing build or adding to it. So there's way more to it than just...
Man, you even look at the rental growth in the past, 12, whatever it is, 15, 18 months, whatever it is since we, bought that one. Man, you've gone from like a market rent of 330, 340 up to market rent now would be circa around about that $400. Yeah. So you kind of, you've had another 25, 30% of rental growth on top as well. So it's just, there's all these extra little things in there when you're buying into the right markets and they perform the right way. You get all these extra little additional bonuses on top, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Man, how much, can I just out of curiosity here, like how often do you keep tabs on your properties and how on top of you are your markets and you know what I mean? Like,
so because I've only got a few, it's a bit easier to keep on top of the markets. And I've got like on like the realestate.com app and like the domain app, I've got like the track your property kind of thing. So I constantly get like emails and little like notifications being like, oh, this sold in your area. And so I'm able to pretty much follow that and be like, okay, that absolute dump got more than what I bought it for, so pretty good there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so like it's just keeping on top of those kind of little things, but it's not like I'm actively really like looking. It's just whenever like little notification comes through, might be once a week, once every 2 weeks kind of thing. Yeah.
So you keep your little finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Keep tabs on the market.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right.
I think it's important to know what your market is right now.
100%, man. Yeah. You got a few $100,000 as an asset. That's pretty cool, man. Yeah. That's pretty cool. All right. Talk me through deal number 3.
Yep.
Where'd you get the deposit from? What's the timeline? So that one, we bought the first one December 2019, settled it December 2019. Yep. Second one, we've had a bit of a hiatus. We've had a bit of a dabble in some other things. We've had a bit of a mess around with a couple of brokers. We've come back, we've bought and settled another one by September 21.
Yep.
Say circa 18 months down the track. Talk us through deal number 3. What's the timelines?
So deal number 3 was about, I think it was July 2022 was when that settled.
Okay.
So I was able to still had obviously a good chunk of equity from that first deal, which has pretty much covered the deposit in a little bit.
Yeah. Of deal number 2. So you've pulled it out of equity out of deal number 1 to fund deal number 2 with change.
Yep.
How much did you have left over?
About the 25 grand.
You still had 25 grand left over?
Yeah.
Wow.
Frugal.
That's good. Had you spent it?
No.
Sitting in offset?
Yeah, I was just sitting there, just chilling out.
Love it. Where'd you get the cash from for deal number 3?
So obviously I've just been still saving along the way, going, okay, keep your head screwed on. Let's go, oh, I've got 2. Let's just splurge now. It's like mine was still...
Had you touched equity from deal number 2?
No.
Still not?
No. Even to this day.
Very nice.
Still no touching of equity there.
Okay. So you saved up a bit more. How much of a deposit did you need for number 3?
Well, number 3 is... The purchase price was $255, so did the old 12% around there. So do the math. I can't be bothered. 27 grand or something like that.
Plus
should know because of what I do for a job.
So you're kind of in for circa around about 50k or so.
Yeah. It's about 50 all up. Again. So obviously, had some savings that I'd obviously still had savings from that first deal that I'd accumulated between purchase price the first time and settling the second deal.
And if you'd put no cash in on the second one as well, you've essentially got like almost like a 2.5 year window from December 2019 to July or June 2022. That's a 2.5 year window of savings as well as what was left over from the equity release as well.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Had the savings there to go, okay, I've pretty much 50% of it is pretty much free money was in my head kind of thing. It's like I didn't have to I haven't had to save that money kind of thing. Just because obviously pulled it out. So then, obviously put the remainder was from savings. So that was a $255 purchase price for a nice 4x2 in regional Queensland.
Beautiful. And what was the condition of this 4x2? 4x2 house for $255.
It was actually recently had some work done. They put like new carpet and everything, a new kitchen as well. So it wasn't too bad. The downstairs bathroom needed a bit of work. But still is get renting for $420 a week.
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
like an 8.5% yield or something stupid.
Straight off the bat.
Yeah,
Straight off the bat.
It's just a little bread and butter as well.
Mate, that's the beauty of these bread and butters, man. You can still get the bread and butter, still get the growth, but also still get the the yield and the cash flow on this thing as well.
Yeah.
So talk me through. You bought that at 88% lend, right? 12% deposit plus closings.
Yep.
What's the current val? Sorry, when you bought this thing and you've settled it, what were we estimating market value at the time?
I think we were estimating it was about 20k under market value at the time. Yeah. So it would have been 270, 275ish.
It was a little bit more than that, I can tell you, firsthand, because it was a 4x2, semi-renovated. You were a bit higher than that.
Perfect.
But let's say what, even if we say, let's say it's 275, whatever, in terms of the 20 under, I'm ripping you here. What about market value now? Because that's July 22, right? So we're talking, we're early Feb 23, right?
Yep.
So we're 6-7 months on, 7 or so months on.
Yep. So obviously we've had some massive doom and gloom with the housing market. With
The whole market went backwards last year, right?
Yeah, every single property. Not one went up. Not
100%.
one went up.
And what's the value on this thing now?
I think we were talking before, and we think we said it was it started with a 3, that's for certain. So not all properties have been doom and gloom. Don't listen to the media.
Yeah. So this thing, again, like, I think once you complete you finish off the reno downstairs, right? This second bathroom.
No, actually, I haven't yet. I haven't done that yet.
When you do that, I think once that's done, like that's in my mind, knowing that market quite well, that's like a mid 300s purchase as well. Yeah, sorry, mid 300s, value in terms of that right now too, being the 4x2 in that location, which is insane. And like, you're getting that 420 a week rent, right? You're getting that 8.5% yield on a deal that's, for one, bread and butter, for two, kind of like half completed. You haven't even finished like a downstairs reno that's maybe 10 grand or whatever to finish off. Like, what's
not
that?
Even, not even, yeah.
Yeah, what's that yield going to be when you finish that off as well?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's insane, man. That's awesome.
It's already through the roof, but it'll be even more nuts.
That's beautiful, man. All right, so we're sitting quite pretty, man. We're sitting really, solid across the board. What's the game plan? Like, what are we up to from here? What happened kind of next in the portfolio, and what's going on in the portfolio now?
So obviously wanted to keep driving forward and keep pushing it as hard as I could, because now I've got the taste for what property can actually do for me. So I was like wanting to go as hard as I could, but then obviously with the past 8 to 12 months of rate rises that we've seen, it definitely put a little bit of a break on my what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I actually pretty much capped out on serviceability. Obviously part of that is also because I still have like a HEX debt from uni days. Which I'm definitely going to be paying down, because I've learned how much a big deal that actually is.
I think it's a funny thing that a lot of people don't realize is how much a HEX debt severely impacts serviceability. Well, even though it's like it's a tax, it's an interest rate free sort of repayment back to the government over time, but it's like they're kind of in cahoots, the banks and the government. It's like you need to pay us back, mate, before you keep borrowing money.
Yeah, well, the other day I learned, like I was under the impression that it's like obviously you pay a little bit down, you get a bit of your serviceability kind of back, but I've learned that it's pretty much all in or all out.
100%, man. You need to wipe that thing out for it to actually have any significant impact.
Yeah. So obviously, capped out on serviceability.
Yes. So you've hit a serviceability wall.
Hit a serviceability wall. Everyone's worst nightmare.
It is, mate.
But didn't really deter me. Just we had a couple of chats and thought that looking at that first property in Brizzy, it seemed like the rent for the property itself was probably a bit capped. It's had its run.
What was it renting for?
It was at that point $340 a week.
Okay.
And when you strip out like the fact that we'd done the refi on it, the yield on it no longer was that great.
Great yield on purchase.
On
190k.
Yeah, unbelievable.
But on a reval of 300 and pulling the capital back out, and on current vals where it was actually worth, it wasn't performing for you. Yeah. Or it wasn't serving a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And like the money could be just better put elsewhere, essentially.
Velocity of money.
Yeah, exactly. We decided to put it on the market.
Here we go. Big decision, mate. Property number one.
Yeah.
The baby.
Yeah.
The 190k shitbox that wasn't going to do anything.
No emotion. Get rid of it.
All right. So no emotion.
No.
You weren't worried.
No. So I think with investing, whether it's shares, property, anything, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
You've got to be analytical about it. It's at the end of the day, is it making you money? Can your money be better put elsewhere? It's like shares as well. If you might have a loser and you might not want to get rid of it because you're like, no, I think it's going to come good. I bought it for all the right reasons. It's just had a bit of a rough time.
Yeah.
If your money can be put elsewhere in another stock that is performing, and you think it's the same reason it'll go up, why not just go to the one that's actually going the direction you want it to go?
It's a very interesting thing, man. It's a very interesting argument. A lot of people like they advocate, you know, buy and never sell and hold on forever. But I mean, you've witnessed it firsthand. Buy crypto, pull it all out, put in crypto. But yeah, man, it's a funny thing where like, and these things realistically happen. Like 12 months ago, you know, planning things out, interest rates hadn't started moving by Feb last year of 2022. Since then, as of today, you know, we're sitting at. They've risen 300 basis points, like 3 full % in that time frame. So that's just killed, you know, the initial plan that we had. Reset, rejig. Instead of just getting stuck and sitting there and going, okay, well, I'm going to sit on this property that's effectively more than doubled in a 3-year window. And, you know, realistically, how much growth is going to have in the short term? What's the velocity of money? Also, the yield isn't that high. What can I do with this additional capital that's left in the deal? And the debt, I think it's a big one, is recycling that debt back out because there's almost 300 grand sitting on that thing.
And also, given the time that I bought it, having refied it in about mid 2021, we were starting to get near that, coming out of that fixed period that I was on. So obviously, with the rate rises that we've had, at the yield it was going to be, it's going to be pretty heavily negative there. So it just made no sense to really keep hold of it with what it had done. It had been a great asset to me. But the time was now to bin it off.
So mate, give me a rundown, man, in terms of sale price. Like, what'd you sell for? Talk me through the process of how everything went down with that as well.
So sold it in the end for $390. So a lovely 200 grand profit there.
on the dot, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much in 3 years. Just
wow,
a massive,
insane,
massive result. Which
over 100%, right? That's over 100% growth.
Yeah,
100% would be 380. So hitting the 390.
Laughing.
Mate, that's insane.
And actually at the time, like when I was like, okay, made the decision to sell, and I was starting to get in touch with some agents. Some of them were saying, you can probably, in the current market, obviously, you know, like it's come off a bit. Probably get you 330 to 360. And there was a few that were saying that, which is, at the time I was like, oh, you're kidding. Like the val on it is like the 390-ish mark kind of thing. I'm like, you kidding? How can it be that? And so then I kept like shopping around a little bit. There's one other agent who was like, no, I can get you like that 390 mark, maybe a bit more kind of thing. So we listed it, and he walked the walk, and he got the job done. We got the 390 for it. It was probably on the market for about 3 weeks or so. So it's not like, I don't feel like I sold it too cheap. It's probably a good price for it in the end, especially with like sentiment around it and whatnot.
Definitely, man. When you look at comps as well, like it was definitely a good price. Like it's not as if like it was ridiculous, but he achieved it. And I think the moral of the story here is like, you can just go with someone you knew, or a lot of people make that mistake. They buy a property from someone, they rent it from them for 7-10 years, and they sell it back through them when ultimately they might be a shit agent. Whereas you've gone and you shopped and you've gone around, you find all these people, and you found someone who was extremely confident in what they were going to get. I remember when you first rang me and you said, mate, he reckons he's going to get 400. I'm like, mate, come on, 400, really?
Well, that's the thing. Like, you can't obviously go with just the appraisal. Like,
100%.
Like, I was like, okay, what's your thought behind why you can get me the 400?
Yeah.
Like, everyone else is like, oh, that's what things are selling for. And this guy was like, well, I just sold this property that's worse than your property for this much. So I can do it. Like, here's the proof that I've done that
100%.
with a couple of properties.
Runs on the board.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let's do it. And it paid off.
And he delivered.
So shop around and find what works for you.
That's good, man. That's good. Mate, I think that, by the way, that's an amazing story, right? So you've bought this thing 3 years ago. You settled in, have you settled?
Yeah. Settled like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, right. So you settled in Jan. So you're pretty much looking, you've settled in December 19, you settled in Jan 23. Pretty well 3 years almost to the dot, right?
Yep.
You've made over 100% growth, you're 105% growth. The thing here, there's two things that really stand out to me. For one, you've banked your profit. A lot of people love talking about all these different things. You make massive equity gains. And I love making massive equity gains and building a portfolio like that. But sometimes like actually solidifying and banking a profit and you're walking away with it is epic, right? Because you clear the debt, you get this money hit your account. Yes, you have to work out what you have to set aside for tax. But a lot of people get worried about capital gains tax and everything. And I remember you and I had this chat about this, and you were a little bit stressed about it because like, how much I'm actually going to have left. And we actually talked through the numbers, and you get your 50% capital gains tax exemption. The remaining portion, yes, is eligible for tax, and you have to pay it. You've got different things you can offset it with that you paid for at the start as well, though. So you were able to minimize your tax down to a very small amount as well. So you're still walking away with that massive chunk.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Roll it into more deals. But the big thing with me, when I look at this result, right, I look at your whole portfolio, because other than you put 45 in on the first one, let's just round it up to 45. You've put in maybe another 20, 25 on the second one. Sorry, on the third one.
Yep.
Right. You've put in 70 grand, right, max. But that first property has enabled you to get into number 2 and halfway into number 3, and you're still walking away with a nice big chunky profit of it. You at the very start of the episode, you were saying like, why? You know, I asked the question, why choose stocks over property, shares and whatnot over property, and you said leverage. And like that example in itself, like for one, you've put in 45, you've sold and profited at 200 or even rounded down or whatever. If you're going 4 times that, you're sitting at 180, which is probably realistically circa around about what you banked. You've literally made a 400% return on investment in 3 years, banked the profit, and actually built an additional portfolio. Now you're selling it, you've cleared the debt, you've moved it on, it's served its purpose. Man, I love that. Yeah. That's awesome.
And going back to your original question as well, where you're like, oh, did you have any hesitancy with like it's 190 grand property? If I did and I didn't decide to do it, and let's say I kept saving and wanted a bit more of a premium property,
yes,
I probably wouldn't have that 200-ish
100%
grand from it. I wouldn't be near saving that amount kind of thing by now. So it just shows you what you can do.
It's awesome, man. Yeah. Honestly, it's awesome. I love that. I love, man, that you, quite honestly, you had the balls to do this, right? A lot of people, they don't like to sell, they hang on. Even when I sold my first one, right? So I sold my first one at like 27, I think I was, that I bought when I was 19. And I was more emotionally attached to it. I think like you probably surround yourself with a few more people that are a bit more like, you know, numbers driven. Let's just focus on what actually makes sense. It took me a year to sell that. I was fortunate in my timing of when I sold it, but if I actually, because the market kind of kept rising a little bit during that time, wasn't coming back or anything. But when I look at like how quickly I then moved after it and I'd banked the profit and I'd got that debt back and I'd done all those different movements, like, yeah, man, moving through and being able to make that calculated decision, just go, nah, I'm going to sell it, bang, picked an agent, sold it, moving on. Like I love, man, like the kind of cutthroat view on it like that as well.
I think that's just how you got to be, really. Like at the end of the day, as I said before, it is a numbers game. Like
100%.
Just can't, like that's, don't be emotional when you're buying or selling, because then you can make poor decisions.
100%.
But there's room for emotion in investing. Like celebrate your wins along the way, but don't get too emotional when you're buying or selling. Like, so
I love that, mate. I love that, man. Portfolio's built out. You've gone, you've built, you've leveraged, you've gone up to 3, you're back to 2. What's next in the portfolio?
So right now I'm in the process of kind of just exactly figuring out exactly what my serviceability actually is now that I've sold the property, just to figure out what I can do. Obviously I've got the ability to go back and build on deal number 2 over in Perth.
Yep.
So that's one option. Another option is you should just look at buying another bread and butter, potentially even depending on what the numbers suggest, going in, potentially even doing both over a certain time frame, because I've got the lease ending on that WA one in August.
Yep.
So I've got time there to get the ball rolling while still looking at doing a bread and butter, perhaps.
Yeah, another high yielding bread and butter.
Yeah,
man, I love it because like your ability to kind of keep moving forward. And I think what's interesting to note, guys, is like a lot of people might think, oh, well, he sold one off and all he's looking at doing is maybe building a secondary dwelling. But there's strategy and there's numbers behind it, right? Because what you got to remember is Liam's getting stuck and he's hitting those serviceability walls. And if he goes out and just buys one more bread and butter, he's probably going to hit that wall again. And yes, you know, he's going to put himself in a different market that's going to have more potential for growth in the short term, which is great, which is obviously one of the key things we're going to try and look to push to do initially. But you got to remember when he puts in that secondary dwelling, let's say he spends in the high 100s for it, right? But then he can rent it for the mid 300s to maybe $400 a week for that asset. He's getting like a 12, 13% yield on this build, getting all this surplus cash flow that is on a deal that he's already paying the council rates for. He's already paying the water rates for. He's already got the insurances for. You know, there'll just be a top-up loan for the secondary dwelling landlord's policy. So it's kind of like, for a very minimal additional cost in terms of the holding cost, which really majority of that's just going to be the mortgage of the actual build, you're going to have this huge additional income that comes in on it. And that's what banks love in times like this. Like, okay, well, his income is now actually increased by, let's say, circa 10 grand or whatever, you know, of what comes off the back of that when it's completed. It's going to bump his numbers. It's going to increase his serviceability. So if he's clearing, you know, 100 and whatever, let's get 100, 150 or whatever from the build, he's still got some other cash. He's still got equity left. Like realistically, he's probably got around about, could be close to 100 grand left in that second deal. You've also got a lot of equity coming out of the third deal you've got there as well. Yep. You know, you've got all these levers you can pull, releasing equity, building that, acquiring more deals. But like building, even if the strategy here was to build one and buy one more, but once that's executed and your serviceability increases, you buy another one, and you're kind of scaling and building that portfolio and continuing the leveraging while while times are still tough with serviceability. And I think, man, that's what I love about it, and being able to work it and finesse it and move it through. And, you know, some people would look at it from one way, but like what you're doing with it and what you're enabling yourself to do, the way you're building it, man, it's how you navigate those markets, and it's how you navigate and keep pushing forward. And I know we didn't go super strategic with lending scenario at the time because it wasn't necessary. Even though we're trying to be preemptive, no one really predicted it was going to go as hard as it was. You know that full well, right? With what you do. And now it gives us a chance to reset and actually strategically build that next finance piece. Like, hats off to you, man. Like, I love it. Like, all the strategic piece of everything you're doing there as well. I know I've commandeered your podcast, mate, on this app, but it's just, man, I love it because, yeah, all these pieces, I see it with what you're doing and what we're building here, and it's inspiring. I love it.
Yeah, I'm loving it all as well.
Beautiful, man. I know the listeners, they always love hearing, like, what are our investors chasing, you know, in terms of goals. And you and I have spoken about intermediate goals and end goals and everything as well. Would you mind talking everyone through, if you don't mind sharing, you know, what is it that you're really looking to build as portfolio? What's driving you towards this?
So the real long-term goal is a very lofty one. It's going to be definitely in the six figures of passive income.
How far into the six figures? 6 figures isn't lofty, mate. 100 grand isn't a lofty goal.
Probably 300 passive is Beautiful. What I want to get to. So obviously a long way to go there. But as we spoke recently, obviously breaking that down into just little kind of wedges along the way. And like, this part will take X amount of time to get to the first 100 of passive. 100. It's going to take us however long, kind of thing. But then after that, we'll be able to snowball a lot more. And that's when it'll really start kicking into gear and get a bit nuts, hopefully. Almost
kind of self fulfilling and kind of self-building and self-replicating within the portfolio as well. Okay, so 300 the end goal, and you've got a couple of intermediate goals you want to knock off as you go through here as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome, mate. Final question for you: is there any advice, or any advice you would pass on to anyone thinking about doing this, or any lessons that you would really love to pass on to people that you think you've learned and it's just super relevant that you haven't heard anywhere else before? You know,
I think for one, like, looking at my scenario, if you know you don't have the time to go and do all the research that you need to do to be able to actually buy in the right areas with the right yields, all these kind of things,
all the good stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff you want in a property, then definitely, like, don't be scared to pay that little bit for the expertise for someone to do it like yourself. It is well and truly worth it. So that's one. And then I guess if you're just on the edge about it, and like potentially your circle of influence is all a bit negative around property, especially at the moment with how it's been, if anything, now's potentially a great time to actually get stuck in, especially in some of these areas that aren't Sydney and Melbourne where it's all doom and gloom. Because once the sentiment starts building up there, you want to be in the markets that aren't in Sydney and Melbourne as well, because the money will just pile in, because that's just the nature of the beast. Like, you look at it over COVID, all the talk was Sydney and Melbourne, but everywhere was going nuts. So I think if you're sitting on the fence and you're not sure, just pull the trigger, get stuck in.
Mate, it's a great point. It's it's an awesome point, because it is a good time to be an investor. You want to be an investor when other people don't want to be an investor. Yeah,
it's quiet right now, so it's easier for you to negotiate really good deals. Whereas before, back in COVID, it was just, you want the property, this is your price. You want to do it now, or you're going to miss it, kind of thing.
Or you're going to be paying another 10, 20 grand in a day or two.
Market moves,
100%, man. Because it's a great point. It's a good time to be an investor, and balls up and get into it, mate. Yeah. So, all right, buddy. Well, mate, thank you very much for coming and jumping on and sharing your story. It's been awesome.
Thank you. I've absolutely loved it.
No worries at all, man. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Keep sending those reviews in, please. Keep sending in those questions for the Q&As. We've got more Q&As coming up. We're loving all the testimonials, guys, and the 5-star reviews. I know you guys are all doing it because I'm seeing it going up repeatedly, so I really, really appreciate it, guys. Keep them flowing in. If you took anything in particular out of this episode that you really liked, or if there's anyone that you think listening to this episode might really relate to, they might have been in a very similar position to Liam, bloody getting you and your brother mixed up. Very, very similar position to Liam here as well, maybe starting in a similar position to what he started in. Or you've got similar family members or whatnot around as well. Guys, this is where, if this episode is providing value, send it to someone that can take that value and take that advice and can help them move the needle with this stuff. regardless of whether you're using Australian Property Scout as a buyer's agency or not, I don't really care. Like, really what this episode is all about, what this podcast is all about, is really giving back and trying to give advice and build some real learning and some foundations around knowledge around property and give you some strength and guidance of wanting to go out there and actually build this and do this. So anyone you might know that take value out of this, please send it on, guys. It really helps us on our end as well. It's going to help people that you know, and it's going to help build, as Liam was saying earlier, your circle of influence. If you're building the right people around you and putting good content in front of them, it's going to get them thinking along the same lines as you. And that's exactly what you want to help level you up as an investor and as a person and in all your successes as well. So guys, that's it from me. Liam, once again, mate, awesome episode, man. Really enjoyed having you on.
Thank you.
Mate, I want to get you back on in 12 months and revisit and see everything that you've done and you've built and touch back on the portfolio. You keen to come back in?
100%.
Beautiful, mate. Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks again, guys. Another Scouting Australia podcast episode. I'll see you next time.